as a moderator for this year's Reunion Weekend Legacies of Georgetown program, celebrating the life and work of faculty and staff members who have greatly impacted the students' experience here at Georgetown. This is the second annual Legends of Georgetown program. This year we are honoring the legendary and world historical figure, Dr. Karski, for whom I worked the entire time I was a teaching assistant with my fellowship here at Georgetown in the government department, where I earned both a master's and PhD. When I left Georgetown in 1989, I was offered a tenure track position at what was then Western Maryland College, which was conveniently little more than an hour from Georgetown. I accepted the position, and currently I am the chair of the Department of Political Science and International Studies of what is now renamed McDaniel College, a small private college of the liberal arts. My name is Christiana Nichols Leahy, and I'm honored to be serving in this capacity. Having studied here with legends such as Dr. Karski and fantastic scholars such as two of my colleagues on the panel today, I was well prepared for a teaching position. I studied comparative politics of Europe and German politics in the European Union with the esteemed Dr. Cerny, who I'm delighted to see here today. I was well prepared to teach courses in international relations by Dr. Lieber, superb scholar. I'm also very thrilled to see him today. But in addition to influencing just the courses and the academics and my research, the areas of specialization, Dr. Karski influenced my life's work, my avocation, as well as my vocation as a passionate activist for human rights. I have served on the board of Amnesty International for 4 terms, and I have also and continue to serve as a consultant on Amnesty International's policy with regard to humanitarian intervention, which got me into a postgraduate research field of international humanitarian law, and I received certification for humanitarian law at the International Institute for Humanitarian Law in San Remo, Italy, at Harvard's program on humanitarian policy and research. I've also served as an expert on humanitarian law and asylum with regard to specific asylum cases, pro bono asylum cases of the Jones Day law form, and we have been successful in getting asylum. So Dr. Karski's life is exemplary of a remarkably courageous commitment to principle and practice of human rights. I became a human rights activist in part because of not only my work formally with Dr. Karski, but my long-term friendship with Jan. As many of you know, I'm sure, and we have an article that we will pass out to you later that details Dr. Karski's work with the Polish resistance. Another of my professors who is not here this morning but may come later, Father James Shaw, told me just about a month ago when we were having lunch that he said at some point a colleague of his said about Dr. Karski that at one point Jan was Poland. So I thought that really sort of summed it up. He, at great risk to himself, as you may know, took the opportunity to not get out of the Warsaw Ghetto, but to sneak into the Warsaw Ghetto to document the atrocities, and then to come to the leaders of the United States, of the British leadership at the time, and to warn them of the atrocities of the Warsaw Ghetto. So, needless to say, Dr. Karski's life has had an impact not only on students, many of you whom are here today, faculty, but also, one could argue, U.S. and international history. So I'm very delighted to share with you some of my memories, as well as our panelists will share their memories about Dr. Karski's life. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to share a few of my own memories, and it's hard to narrow them down to a few. So I'll share one, and that is I brought a prop, my very weathered copy of Dr. Karski's book, Story of a Secret State, which he gave me one day in his office, and it was weathered then, and it is weathered more so 20-some years later. I keep it on my desk for a variety of reasons. One, because it reminds me of Jan and the other so that my students will say, what is that book? You know, it looks like it was in a fire or something. I said, well, I'm glad you asked. Why don't you read the jacket of that book? And then I proudly say, that was my professor at Georgetown. I also have a picture of Jan from one of the many obituaries. This one's from The Economist, framed in my office. And in that one, he has a Band-Aid on. And it's sort of just, you know, evocative of this person who really sacrificed a great deal to do the kinds of passionate things that he did to support and defend human rights for everyone. I'll share this memory and also tie it to the book as well. One day I went to Dr. Karski's office with a bouquet of flowers, and don't feel badly, I did this to some others as well. And he said, oh, Miss Nichols, these are so beautiful. You know what you have here. And then he proceeded, I'm not going to do my Karski imitation, I'm sure you all have yours as well. He proceeded to name them in their Latin botanical names. And I realized, having read the book, why that was. And the reason was when he escaped from the Nazis after having been tortured and rescued from a hospital, he had to pose as a gardener. That was his sort of, you know, incognito position that he occupied at the time. So pre-internet, as I tell my students, so you couldn't just Google every flower, he learned every botanical name for every flower. So at that time, I didn't ask him about it, but I knew about it from the book. So the book came up again, of course, after I'd read it, and I said, oh my God, Dr. Karski, we have to talk about this. He said, it's ancient history. And I think part of the reason for that is he really didn't talk about it very much. Excuse me. And those of you that had him in class know that it wasn't really a subject that he talked about. He always demurred on talking about his personal experience, which also speaks volumes for his humility. And then the other tie into the bouquet is he then proceeds to tell me, I once took flowers just like this backstage to a ballerina. And I said, oh, you did? And then he tells me the whole story. And obviously, those of you that know him well, that ballerina became the love of his life and his wife. But he tells me in the vernacular at the time, I said, so did you know her? He said, I didn't know her. I was a groupie. So to hear Jan say, groupie, I was a groupie. So these flowers remind me of being a groupie. And he says, Ms. Nichols, are you a groupie? For him, I said, absolutely, Dr. Karski. I am one of your groupies. One other tie-in to the book, and then I will turn it over to others to share their memories, is this book sits on my desk in my office, but has also been at home many times. I have a 13-year-old child, and last year in the 6th grade, they had an assignment to pick a world historical figure from World War II and to do a written research paper and a PowerPoint presentation. So, of course, Rowan says, I'm going to do Jan Karski. Now, to be fair, it's a private, very elite, selective prep school, but it's Episcopalian and not Catholic, for one. So maybe that's why the young teacher, who also young, because I realize now that, you know, they're very young when they get out, he said, I'm sorry, you can't do that because I've never heard of it. So Rowan came home deflated, and he said, Mom, can you believe that? I said, well, all you have to do is send an email with the following attachments from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, honoring him in the state of Israel, a little film clip from Shoah. I said, I think he'll change his mind, the teacher. So I got this very apologetic email from this young history teacher at my son's school. And then Rowan went on to ask me to borrow the book. And he proceeded to do this amazing paper and PowerPoint, complete with all the stuff that children can do with PowerPoint, still figuring out. But he had a film clip in there of Jan, which is a film clip in the documentary Shoah. And he said that literally the entire class was mesmerized. And this is 7th grade boys. So needless to say, he understood, and it thrilled me to have my 13-year-old really appreciate, after all these years, hearing Jan Karski, who really was Jan Karski. And for boys of that age, the heroism in Dr. Karski's book is very compelling. So needless to say, that was a really wonderful tie into the past and the present. So without any further ado, I will introduce, or allow my colleagues to introduce themselves, and we will contemplate together and along with you our memories of Dr. Karski, both as a professor and colleague.
I'm Robert Lieber. I'm a professor in the Department of Government and with a joint appointment in the School of Foreign Service. A few observations about Jan. First, in a set against a contemporary environment where the word hero is used to describe a basketball player who sinks a three-pointer at the buzzer, the word has become devalued. There are few people in life who really deserve that honor in that term, and Jan is one of those very rare figures. He was one of the very first, if not the first, to bring out eyewitness accounts of the Holocaust to the Western world. As many of you know, he figures prominently in the definitive 8-hour documentary Shoah, filmed by the brilliant French cinematographer Claude Lanzmann. He's on screen for about 40 minutes out of 8 hours. And yet, while he was a very accomplished man, and I think almost everyone here knows the story of his life and the saga. Also, is DeRoy Murdoch here? DeRoy, you were going to pass out some copies of that. DeRoy Murdoch, who's a Georgetown '86, wrote an obituary that appeared in the Washington Times. And it's if you want to convey to your friends and relatives what Jan was like and what his story is, in this concise obituary, really the summary of Jan is really quite accomplished. And yet Jan, really, who was an extraordinary man, and almost everyone here had him as a professor or knew of him on campus, there was a certain modesty as well as wit, and never taking himself more seriously than he might have. He felt, I think, that in the Holocaust he had never done enough. I got to know Jan shortly after I arrived here at Georgetown in 1982, and of course my colleague Carl Cerny, who goes way back, is in a better position than I to tell you about, we all go way back, tell you about Jan's earlier days here. But I had already known a bit about Jan before I arrived, and I got to know a lot more about him very quickly. And in those days, I used to teach the large introductory international relations course, Government 006, which I suspect some of you in the room may have taught. I would teach it to 175 or so students. And one day I asked Jan if he would be willing to give a guest lecture in my course. And he said to me, well, maybe, maybe not. He said, if you want somebody who can speak to your students about the Holocaust, I can't do that. If you want someone to speak to them about his own experiences during that period, that I can do. And of course, I said to Jan that that would be perfect. And in fact, his appearances were remarkable. Somewhere around, I haven't been able to find it, I've got a VHS tape that the campus audio-visual people made of him speaking to my course. But it was really extraordinary, and it held the students, I think, riveted and changed by that experience. But also, I noted that Jan was somebody who had a good sense of humor about himself. And one of the first Georgetown commencements I went to was in 1983, when we still had a unified commencement. And the weather that day was something like what it was the middle of this past week. And probably around 100 with high humidity. You could cut the air with a knife. It was so thick. So we had been on stage in our caps and gowns, and I think I had a borrowed cap and gown which weighed a ton. And afterward, we came into the ICC Galleria, and there were tables spread out. And somehow we got in there just about first. And we came up to this drinks table where there was wine. There may even have been hard liquor, for all I remember. as well as soft drinks. And he said to me, "Are you going to have a drink?" I said, "Well, I'm going to have orange juice." He said, "Don't you drink?" And this is about noon. And I said, "Yes, I drink, but I'm an Aristotelian. All things in moderation." His reply was, he straightened himself up and said, "I'm a Polish cavalry officer, I'm going to have a drink."